then it will no longer remain black money, and there is a chance of, there is a chance of getting caught. You will get caught. So that's the second part. The third part is that agriculture income in India is not taxed at all. So all the agriculture income ultimately finds its way into things like real estate and gold. Because a big farmer is not going to invest money in the stock market. Because at the end of the day, he likes to touch and feel whatever he's bought. So in cities like Shimla, Chandigarh, even the National Capital Territory, Dehradun, a lot of real estate prices are obviously driven by black money, and they're also driven because agriculture money has to find a way somewhere. So unless we kind of crack down on, obviously we need to start taxing money earned from agriculture. And the second thing that we need to do is, Mr. Modi said during his electoral campaign that we'll bring all the black money back and each one of us will get rupees 15 lakhs, which Amit Shah recently said, it was just it was an electoral gimmick, chunavi jumla tha wo. So I would be more happy if Mr. Modi started to target black money within the country, which would be easier to recover. And even if it's not 15 lakhs per person, even if it's 15,000 per person, it would go a longer way in ensuring that a lot that is wrong with the Indian economy, it will be set right. So once all the black money and the money from agriculture that is going into real estate, where buildings are being created just for the sake of investment, nobody is living in them. So that has to stop. But that will not stop because all the political parties get funded by black money. So that's the basic disconnect.
So what do you think is the affordable price for a home? In India, you have vast diversity in income range and places, opportunities. How do you arrive at that?
So, what he is basically asking is that if people need to buy homes, people need to rather be able to afford to buy a home, what is the price that we need to look at? So this is a very difficult question to answer, but I basically came across a number recently in a book called The Making of India, written by a gentleman called Akhilesh Tilodia, who works for Kotak Group. And he basically calculated using, the bottom 40%, the average income, or rather the average consumption expenditure of the bottom 40% of the population. And he said that the average price of a home, if it needs to be affordable, has to be anywhere between rupees 5 to 10 lakhs. And which is nowhere near, in a place like Delhi, the average price in the National Capital Territory is 75 lakhs. The average price of a house in Bombay is 1.34 crore. So even if you go to cities like Pune, Pune is said to be not very expensive, the average price of a home in Pune is around 60 lakhs. So, we are not building, so there is a great disconnect here, and we are not building homes for people to live in. We are building homes for people to invest, and it's all the illegal political money which is going in there. So.
Virender said, does it make more sense for you to rent a house than to actually buy it and keep away the family pressures? And
that's a very interesting question because, not now, but at least a few years back, there was great pressure on me to buy a house, which I think is a very stupid decision in this day and age. For the simple reason that, when you can, I live bang in the middle of Bombay and I pay a rent of around 20,000 rupees per month, which is, if you were to calculate it into a yearly figure, would be around 2.5 lakhs. And that place, it's what in euphemistic terms we call a studio apartment, but anybody who's lived in Bombay would know it's a one-room kitchen. And that one-room kitchen costs around 1.25 crores. So just do the math. I can rent a house which costs 1.25 crores at 2.5 lakhs. So the rental yield is not even 2%, or it's around 2%. So why would I buy a house? Obviously I can't afford it, that's a different thing, but even if I wanted to push the envelope a little, I can't, right?
Just going back to the book, you mentioned, Virender also pointed out, just one failure can trigger a kind of a cascading effect and create a forest fire. So, how do you see that?
Okay, so I have an example in the book around a forest fire. Basically, in the US and even when you go towards Mexico, there are a lot of forest fires. So there are policies that the government has as to how to deal with those fires. And in the US, the policy is, in the state of California, to put out any and every fire. In Mexico, the policy is to let small fires burn. And they do it for a very simple reason. They do it because if you allow small fires to burn, then the dry leaves, the shrubs, which are basically burnable material, keep getting burned. They don't get accumulated. In the US, what happens is, because there is a policy to kind of put off all fires, these dry leaves, shrubs, etc. keep getting accumulated. So US does not get small fires, but it gets big fires. Now when you compare it to Mexico, they get a lot of these small fires, but they do not get big fires at all. So what is the context, in the context of my book? So basically, if you look at the global market and the economies, they are like forest fires. Avoiding small problems creates greater systemic problems when the brush between the trees builds up. Trying to micromanage small fires in central banking and fiscal policy leads to growing confidence by risk takers. So you get fewer small fires and paradoxically a greater chance of a major catastrophic fire. So this is, these are some lines from a gentleman called John Malden. And so basically, if you look at what happened in the aftermath of the financial crisis, the US government rescued Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, then they let Lehman Brothers go, but then they rescued AIG the next day. The British government rescued the Royal Bank of Scotland. The German government rescued the largest home loan lender in the country. So basically what it does is, when the government keeps coming to the rescue of financial institutions, a belief gets built up that, okay, we can take risks, go about lending money, but if something goes wrong, the government will come to our rescue. So it is similar to a fire, where if the government keeps putting out smaller fires, if it keeps rescuing every financial institution, then the financial system will end up taking so much risk that one day everything is going to blow up, which is what has been happening over the last 5 to 6 years. And it is a big worry in me.
Do you think the government has put in a small fire now, like going after this corporate espionage?
What he's basically asking here is that, if you've been reading the papers, the government has gone after a lot of corporates who have been getting the benefit of leaked documents from the Ministry of Oil. Dhirendra, क्या कहेंगे आप?
No, these are very ingenious Indian way, and it is nothing of this scale. It is crony capitalism. Businesses here have thrived on such practices, and I'm not talking of these big businesses. I run a very small business, and there I find that this is a way of life. I think it will take many years to fix this. It will take many years to restore that. You do the right thing the right way, and it will happen. And many of the time, it is lack of transparency, or the general pace of things and trying to seek commercial expediency, which drives it. It is very much embedded in our psyche for many years. So there is a great possibility that there may be nothing valuable in those papers, but it's simply that people are used to stealing, people are used to the this conduct. It is almost like falling in habit of jumping the red light all the time, even if there is never a need. Sometimes there is no urgency, no need, but you just think like going ahead. I think I look at it purely like that. Of course, this is a sector where there will be I would not like to undermine that the financial implication of such things could be substantial. The limited way, I know some of the people who are behind bars. So I also know that they are largely they would not
small fries.
So one is the small fry. Other is that I also feel that they would conduct in a very legitimate way. They are reasonably compliant people, but they will be jumping the yellow line kind of people. They are not downright crooked. They are not real estate guys. But
Yeah, I mean, see,
yeah, of course.
What I was surprised by is that why is everybody surprised? I mean, this is the normal way of doing things in India. It's just that the media has made a big deal out of it, and but which in a way is good, because you know, if this has been happening and it's a way of life, and if it gets reported, probably it won't happen as much as it does.
No, there is a big deal. The big deal is that the government initiated moves to catch such a thing, which has never happened before. In fact, the irony of the matter is that, you know, the letter which says that such a thing is happening and we need to fix this, that also got leaked. You know, so I think it's a big deal.
The other thing that got leaked is the inputs to the finance minister's budget speech. So, like, as a person watching the market closely, you talked about the real estate and other implications. So, what are you expecting from this budget?
This budget, I am not expecting anything. In fact, and ideally we should not. It's an accounting statement, but you know, there is media. A lot of things being talked about. It is built up, and this budget, I'll be, you know, from an individual savers point of view, I clearly have one expectation, which is, you know, we have created a huge distortion in the economy, which is, you know, I'll cite you with an example that people get started. Somebody like you will get started in an organized sector. Your provident fund account will be open, and then your long-term committed savings for a lifetime will start getting into fixed income, which will be appropriated by the government, and it will give you 8.5%, and it will keep getting realigned lower. So money getting into fixed income is unable to beat inflation, because you know, most of the time government will be realigning it with real inflation without any significant margin. So effectively your lifetime savings will go down in value in real terms. And so this is a huge distortion, and government is appropriating it for many, many years. It was fine till 1990 when everything was regulated. Everything was, you know, we don't know how valid are those inflation numbers, but people were generally well off, buying their houses after retirement and making a living. And also, you know, most of the people in the organized sector were government employees. So being a government employee is like being son-in-law of government of India. That's what my parents are. In fact, my parents, I actually envy them. My mom was a teacher. My father was a central government employee, and they are quite amazed at, you know, the kind of savings they end up with now, which they never had when they needed it while we were growing up. So, so in that sense, you know, this is quite an irony that a large part of the people will not be government employees. They will be worse off, and their money will get into fixed income, and they will be living longer, and they will not have enough money. So I'm looking at, you know, one broad thing, whether it happens in this year, next year, another year, which is driving long-term savings into market in a methodical way, and giving investors a choice. Let EPF exist, let national pension system exist, let's have a discretionary, and every employee and employer given a choice that you choose what you want. There are people who will be willing to, you know, there are enterprising employees. There are not so enterprising employees. There are mobile, you know, there are people who are flexible, people who are changeable, the people who embrace changes. There are people who get rewarded for assuming risk. And I think, you know, and the long-term story of equity is all about discipline and being diversified. Equity is risky if you think for a few days. Equity is risky if you are trying to, you know, bet on this budget to try and make some money. I have never come across a well-off trader, but I have never come across a poor, disciplined investor. This is something which I look forward to. More than the budget, you know, I'm looking at a lot of simplification. You know, when I started my small business in 1990, it used to take about, you know, 10 years to get a telephone connection. It used to, you know, I was just one person like Vivek who used to work in my bedroom. But I thought to gain legitimacy, I incorporated a company in a house in Preet Vihar, where I live even now. So I got a court order. You know, I got a summon from Patiala House Court, and I was very scared. I was, you know, 21-year-old. That I have incorporated a business in a residential place, so I must come and give a justification. I just went there, turned up. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I was fined 2200 rupees. Then